For years, Harley-Davidson dominated the bagger scene alone, until 2014 when Indian introduced the Chieftain as a new and viable competitor. Now, BMW joins the fight with the 2021 R18B. These bikes are designed and built to be ultimate touring machines, but their appeal also lies in style, tradition, and the rider's connection to the motorcycle. So we're out here on Pacific Coast Highway to not only push these bikes and test their performance limits, but slow down a little bit, enjoy the scenery, enjoy the style of the bikes, and test that rider's connection to see which one really is the best bagger. After spending a few days riding on Pacific Coast Highway, we took the 3 motorcycles out to our performance testing facility to get some numbers, and then back here to the Cycle World headquarters to run on our dyno for horsepower and torque. Now I'm here with executive editor Justin Dawes.
How's it going?
To talk about what we've learned through all of this testing and find out which is in fact the best bagger. One really important judgment criteria for baggers specifically is fit and finish.
Very much so. Probably one of the most important.
Absolutely. It's something that Harley-Davidson has set a very high bar for in this category over the years. They've developed an incredible vendor network, so the stuff that they are able to do with their motorcycles, it's just very high quality paint. The cable hygiene is excellent. The chrome is all very high quality.
It's so good that you don't actually think about it, if you know what I'm saying. Like you walk up to a Harley and you go, yep, that's a Harley. But you don't think about like how good that gap is between this part and that part, and how nice the chrome is, and all these things that they all come together to make one nice package, but they're not in your face like, this stuff is really nice and we did a really good job. They hide the work.
But it's been a staple of what a Harley is for decades, so you expect it.
You expect it,
So the BMW being a new motorcycle, when you put it next to the Harley, I started to notice hoses and cables on the Harley that I hadn't noticed at all before. The BMW is so extraordinary in that its fit and finish is immaculate. It's
it
very,
really
very
is.
good.
I mean, from every angle you look at that bike and it's just put together really well. The fit, the finish, the materials. It's kind of like more of a polished jewel than the Harley. Like the Harley is very nice and it's solid and it's put together well, and you know that. But then the BMW just takes that kind of to another level and adds a bit of shine on every bit of that.
And then there's the Indian. The Chieftain, we all sort of saw fit and finish shortcomings with that motorcycle throughout our testing.
Yeah, I mean, it's going up against the Harley and the BMW. And when it was the Harley and the Indian, when you're comparing those two, the gap didn't seem so wide. But now when you add the Indian on the high end, or the BMW on the high end of the scale, the gap between the best and the worst is much larger, and you really start to notice the shortcomings of Indian's fit and finish game.
Yeah, and like our third tester said, the 50-50 rule. If it's going 50 miles an hour, if it's 50 feet away, it looks great. The lines of the bike look great, but as you get closer, you notice some uneven gapping, you notice unfinished seams. We had a problem with the Super Chief badge in that comparison, and on the Chieftain here, the badging, uneven gapping, it
doesn't lay totally flush on the tank.
Yeah.
And then you look at, like, when you're sitting behind the bars, there's a plastic trim piece between basically the windshield and the gauges. It's just blow molded plastic, and the flashing from the mold is still there. Like, it's not trimmed and it's not smooth, and you don't see anything like that on the Harley or the BMW.
Yeah, and I mean, with the Indian, that screen and the buttons, it's a line that you can see from the Indian to a Polaris Razor to a Polaris Slingshot. And they're trying to define Indian as a separate entity, but when you have such clear branding across, it ends up feeling Polaris.
Yeah, but even if you didn't know, if you'd never seen a Razor and you'd never seen a Slingshot, and you would look at the buttons and you go, there's this big and plasticky and rubbery, and they just, like, it just doesn't feel substantial like the other two bikes.
Sure.
And so you're kind of let down in that regard, which is a very important part of these motorcycles, is feeling like you have something that's very nice and its fit and its finish is really good.
So moving from fit and finish, let's get into engine power and delivery.
Yeah, big engines, big twins.
Big
Not
twins.
big twins, but big twins.
Yeah,
they're all
and,
big twins.
You know, air-cooled or air and oil-cooled, very large displacement, overbuilt engines that are designed to be torque-rich and a lot of fun from a red light to a red light, you know? And they've all got similar but different character.
For me, the standout was the Indian. That engine was just what I want out of a bagger engine.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. It comes on strong, it revs up with excellent roll-on power, feels good the whole time, it doesn't vibrate too much.
It's torquey in the mid-range, and that's where you want a lot of the torque on a bagger, is that just kind of you know, and there it just satisfies. You could be in 5th, 6th gear and just let that thing just go down to almost idle and just go, just roll it on and it just goes. Like, you don't have to shift as much on the Indian compared to the other two bikes.
You can lug it out from 1200 RPM or you can rev it toward the limiter.
Yeah,
and
it's pretty happy everywhere.
Great.
That's probably the best piece of the Indian is that engine.
The Harley engine, the Milwaukee 8, we know it, we love it, that 114. In this comparison, it just feels refined. That's the word that we kept coming back to.
What's interesting is, to me, it's the smoothest engine out of the three.
Yeah, and it is. It's so well balanced.
When you're going down the highway, you got the cruise control on, and you're cruising along at 75, 80 miles an hour, it's just so happy, and it's just so smooth and not an issue, and you're not going like, oh, it's rattling me, or it's making the mirrors buzz. It almost disappears, which is interesting for a Harley engine to disappear.
Right, but that engine rubber mounted rumbles and shakes at an idle, but as soon as you crack it up, as soon as you twist the throttle, it is buttery smooth.
Yes. Touching on the power delivery compared to the Indians. When the power comes on, it comes on later than the Indian. And that's probably why I like the Indian a little bit better, is it just has a little more torquey mid-range. But when you get it up on the top, the Harley's awesome.
I mean, again, the Harley is incredibly predictable. It has traction control, but no ride modes. The throttle just does what you want it to. You know, clutch feel excellent. It's right there, always doing exactly what you're asking of it, which I really liked. The BMW is purposefully built out of balance so that it would have a charming and nostalgic
I will say
vibration.
I'm gonna call BS on BMW on that. I'm gonna say it wasn't purposely made that way. It's a function of how big that engine is and the way that they had to space out the crank on it. It's inherent to that motor. They wanted to, they could have smoothed it out, but they went, oh, it has character now. And I think they missed that mark because it vibrates too much.
I mean, they undoubtedly missed that mark. That was the one thing that every tester said in the testing of this bike is, if it didn't vibrate like this, we would like it so much more.
The engine has a lot of character.
It does.
It's got power. It makes it in a very different way. It's still torquey, but it doesn't feel as torquey as the Indian, and it doesn't feel like it has as much top end as the Harley.
Yeah, we saw on the dyno, it was not able to produce the horsepower or the torque numbers that either of the other bikes were.
But it definitely has character.
It has character for days.
You fire that thing up.
Yeah.
And the whole shift of the bike when it fires is so crazy.
Again, a lot of that character relevance, you know, it sort of takes experience with the past airhead. If you haven't spent time, if you don't know what those old airheads feel like, who cares about this character? It's just an engine that shakes. Cool, so moving on from engine performance and power delivery out to handling, brakes, and suspension. This is one area, 3 areas, that the bikes really differentiated themselves.
Very much so. And this is where we start to have a little bit of disagreement as well. So they all are different. We agree on one thing.
Yep.
Let's start with that.
Okay, the Harley-Davidson. The Harley was the best all-rounder.
Yeah, best all-rounder.
Yep.
Like nobody that was riding these bikes in a test disputed that the Harley was the best handling bike out of the bunch overall. Overall.
And we're going on parking lot handling, mid-speed, 40 to 60 canyon carving, and then highway touring.
Yeah, exactly. So as on an average, the Harley does all of them well and does them all competently.
Yes.
The other two bikes, on the other hand, were better in a couple places.
Right.
Well, parking lot handling, the Harley's the best. The Indian's a little bit better, but then that mid-speed stuff where the roads aren't super twisty, that bike is very happy in that kind of pace where things are just moving, cruising.
It tips in
nice.
quickly.
It's stable. It does get a little upset if you hit a bump in a corner when you're moving at a more spirited pace. Things start to get a little wallowy.
If you're on
and
the
weird.
highway and some big sweeper and you hit a bump, we all notice that it can upset the chassis. You can get some sort of a wallowing effect, which we didn't see on any of the other bikes.
The other two bikes didn't do that. But then you get into like the really tight stuff that we hit on the way up to Big Sur, and the BMW actually started to shine there, which was weird because at first we were like, man, the BMW scrapes really easily, and it seemed like it was scraping sooner.
Right.
But then I started to notice whoever got on the BMW was actually going faster. It tips in easier. And you're saying because you want to avoid the vibes.
I still claim it's my subconscious trying to rev it up to smoothness.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, it just seemed like it tips in easier. It feels lighter. The weight of the bike goes away at that pace.
Yeah, over 45 miles an hour, that bike has no right to handle as well as it does.
It does.
It feels
does.
great.
Yeah.
But low speed handling, it is heavy.
It feels heavy getting out standing.
It's a measured
it feels very heavy
899
moving around
pounds.
the parking lot.
Yeah.
Maneuvering slowly.
And you've got the coffee can pistons, and when you're moving slow, you can feel the boxing effect, which has a negative effect on handling.
Yeah. Claimed weights are wildly different from what we measured from manufacturer stated specs, which made the BMW even heavier than we thought it was after we measured.
Yeah, the Harley-Davidson was lighter than claimed, the Indian was as heavy as claimed, and the BMW was substantially heavier than they said, at 899 pounds.
Yep.
BMW and the Indian both have damper tube front suspension. The BMWs performed a little better than the Indians, I'd say. The Indian's rear monoshock, I would prefer over the BMW's automatically adjusting.
And I kind of go the other way.
Okay.
I agree that the forks were very, you're correct on the forks for me, but the rear suspension, I prefer the BMW's just a little bit more, maybe for the convenience factor of that it's automatic. I don't have to get out a pump to pump up the rear shock when I put a passenger or I put stuff in the bags or whatever.
Yeah.
And it does a great job of soaking up these kind of hard hits on the freeway.
Yeah.
Where the Indian, I felt like it maybe blew through a little bit more and you could feel a little bit more shock to your system. The Harley was actually the most harsh.
The Harley-Davidson has 2.15 inches of rear suspension travel, whereas the Indian has 4.5 and the Beamer has 4.7.
Yeah.
So it's understandable that that's going to run out of stroke. In any low-speed damping, excellent, but when you hit something like a pothole on the highway, it lets you know it.
It lets you know, for sure.
Braking, typically brake feel on the Harley-Davidson is exceptional, but on this test model, there was something up. We either had warped rotors or something up with the pads, but there was a there was effect
a vibration
to it. That really muddied brake feel as you're going in. You could barely tell what you were getting.
It made it difficult to feel what it was doing. Indian's brakes, they are fine, but they feel a little bit wooden when you get deep into the lever. Like if you really want to slow down, you're never going to one finger those brakes. You have to have two fingers. And when you get into the lever deep, like you're kind of like panic stopping or stopping quickly on the front brake, it basically feels like you're just squeezing a block of wood.
Sure.
Nothing else is happening. You're going to slow down at the same rate for the rest of the travel of the lever, no matter what you do. And then the ABS on the Indian is the least refined.
Right, I'd say that. The ABS on the Indian is a area that's could use some refinement for years. You know, if you're out riding in the dry and you stomp it, chirp, 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 you know, you'll hear it locking up, and that translates to slide in the way. So as far as handling brakes and suspension, handling and suspension, we all preferred the Harley. Braking feel, I'd say the BMW took it, and the Harley was just out of the contest on that one.
Yeah, it's kind of an outlier.
Yeah, and then the Indian is adequate.
It does what it needs to do, but maybe not. The numbers don't lie, though.
Right.
Right, but when you're squeezing the lever, you're like, is this thing gonna really stop in time?
So, like we said in the beginning of this video, rider feel and connection are a huge part of the bagger riding experience. And without a doubt, the Harley-Davidson has this area nailed.
Yeah, I mean, they should have it nailed. They basically, it's their segment.
It is. I mean, when you look at motorcycle sales in America for the last few decades, they have been dominated by Harley-Davidson, and it is not because of performance numbers, it is because of feel and connection.
Exactly.
The BMW it's a first-year bike. They're pulling from some BMW history, but they're also implanting a lot of DNA that isn't necessarily true BMW. Indian is pulling from some original Indian DNA. You know, they have that flathead-looking engine with the parallel push rods, but also, like we said before, there's aspects of it that feel very Polaris.
Yeah, and that's the big issue with that bike for me is the connection to that bike and the feel. Like, this is something that's so subjective and it's just difficult. Yeah,
it's just intangibles.
And it's intangible, and so this is one of the hardest parts of a motorcycle to judge, and yeah. It's not hard when we're talking about sport bikes or track lap times, but when you get into this class of motorcycle, it's an important part.
Yeah.
And how do you
and in the comments, feel free to tell us that we're wrong.
Yeah.
Because in your opinion, we might be.
Yeah, exactly.
It comes down to what you as the rider feel when you are riding this bike.
Yeah.
And the three testers here all very quickly said that the Harley-Davidson had the best feeling.
Yeah, it just feels right. You go, yes, this is what it's about.
It feels cohesive, it feels organic. That was my biggest problem with the BMW, was that so much of it felt forced, felt inorganic, felt like this is what an American bagger is. It's big, it's heavy, it shakes. And those parts of, that's what I don't like about the R18, is it's too big, it's too heavy, it shakes too much. And all of that pulls me out, makes me feel disconnected.
Yeah, it feels simulated.
Right.
The experience in a way.
It feels like a translation.
They just missed it by a little bit, but it's that little bit that throws you off.
And the Indian sounds great. It has good feel, but it is just not as refined as the Harley-Davidson.
Yeah.
So Harley-Davidson absolutely smoked the feel and connection.
Yep.
Yeah. Touring comfort and technology. These bikes are all designed and built to be long mile tourers.
Yeah.
And they are that, but again, all different character.
This is where Morgan and I are going to have like an octagon match.
Yeah.
Throw down, and it's we disagree on two bikes here, but once again, the first bike we don't disagree on.
Easy. You can probably guess. The Harley-Davidson, the Street Glide Special, we both found to have the most complete technology suite, best touring chops. It was the bike that everybody wanted to ride home.
It was the most comfortable. The seat, it has a great shape. The handlebar position, like to reach the bars, it's not too wide, they're not too tall, they're not too far back, they're just there, like right where your hands fall.
Yep.
It's perfect.
The angle and height of the floorboards are perfect.
Dialed.
You know, even, how tall are you?
5'10".
5'10", 6'4", we're both totally comfortable on this thing. The BMW, it's a little bit further of a stretch to the bars. I really didn't like that the floorboards locked you into one position. And for me, with these big old boats, every time I wanted to apply some pressure to the rear brake pedal, I had to wedge my toe in between the cylinder and that pedal.
Yeah, yeah. And I have a size 10 boot, and I don't have that issue at all.
Sure.
And I don't feel locked in on that bike. Yes, the floorboard is barely a floorboard on these bikes.
Yeah.
It's small. But for me, I could still move around, and I didn't feel locked into one position. Unlike the bike with the largest floorboard, I actually felt like I could not move on that bike. I was in one position,
but that was
and
from
that
the
was
seat,
it.
Right?
That's because of the seat.
Okay, so when Indian released the Challenger a couple of years ago, they came out with a new West Coast style seat with a steeper back, and they put that on all of their touring models. If you look at the base of this seat, it has a seam that curves toward the front. For me, with my narrow hips, it isn't really an issue. I fit inside that curve. For Dawes, where it curved up caused pressure points, and it was just radically uncomfortable.
It was massively uncomfortable. I'm probably built more like a bagger rider than you. Like if you're built like a barrel like I am, whether it's by genetics or your choice of what you eat, it becomes uncomfortable. It causes pressure points, and you're locked into one position on that bike. So I can move my feet around the floorboards, but I'm there, I'm stuck. I can't move my butt forward and back. And when you're touring, that becomes uncomfortable.
So ergonomics, Harley, BMW, Indian.
Yeah, and
for you.
And for me, and
but I would put ergonomics. I would put the BMW at the bottom because you don't have the option to really change your foot position.
yeah, and so it comes down to this: if you got big feet, BMW is the bottom. If you got a big butt, Indian's the bottom.
Moving on to infotainment. Each bike has a screen with speakers and and its own navigation system. They're way different. I'd say that the Indians is the most intuitive. It's the easiest to use. The navigation is the best.
The touchscreen is awesome.
The touchscreen is
you
awesome.
You can move widgets around. You can set up the screens.
The customizable rider screens
totally
are awesome.
Totally rad.
Very cool.
Yeah.
The Harley, again, it's got that Gorilla Glass. It's easy to use with a glove on. It's quick. The navigation isn't quite efficient.
Yeah,
I'd say as the Indian.
I had a few times on the Harley where it had me take some crazy routing.
Sure.
Like where it felt like it almost got kind of confused where I was at.
Yeah.
And then I would stop the trip, go back, put the same address in,
reset,
and it would immediately take me on the right direction.
Sure. And it's something that you can't do on the fly. You have to stop so that you can adjust it.
Yeah. So that was kind of odd. But then the BMW, the navigation, you have to have an app on your phone. It's not native in the.
Sure.
So that is a real pain in the butt.
It requires you to have the Motorrad Connected app to use music and navigation from your phone.
From your phone, yeah.
So in order to play personal music or use navigation, you have to have your phone connected. It does not do these independently. I was using the designated phone compartment, a compartment that BMW designed to hold my smartphone. It has a picture of a smartphone on it. I put my phone in that and rode the motorcycle, and the vibration broke the auto stabilization and the autofocus on my phone's camera. It's designed to do one thing.
It's one thing.
And
hold
it
the phone.
breaks the dang thing that.
And you have to have the phone connected.
Right.
So
and it is a key point of using that technology, and it just doesn't work.
Huge miss.
Huge miss. Although I will say, I was over 2,600 RPM.
Yeah.
So I mean, it comes back to what we've said over and over. The BMW, if you keep it in its parameters, is great. If you keep it under 3,000 RPM, if you just use it for cruising, if you never want to twist the throttle and really go ham, excellent.
Yeah.
But if you do, move your phone.
Yeah, don't put your phone on the bike.
Yeah.
The rest of the system too, like menus, getting to be able to change parameters of the bike, heated grips, things like that. The BMW, the dash is amazing looking.
It's amazing
it's
looking.
Awesome.
It is not intuitive.
It's not easy to use.
Yeah.
Too many steps to do everything.
And the buttons that you use, it's like, do I use the menu or the side push or the scroll?
Yeah, exactly.
It's different, and it takes a lot of getting used to.
It takes a long time to get used to, but it's still, in terms of efficiency, it's much worse than the other two. Like just resetting a trip meter, you have to press 4 or 5 different sequence of buttons to be able to clear the trip meter on the BMW.
Harley,
one button.
Hold one. The Indian, you go to the rider screen, hold it.
Yeah.
It's so simple, it's
super
so
easy.
intuitive, and the BMW just takes so many more unnecessary steps.
Yeah, I mean, the heated grips and the heated seat, there's not a button for that on the bike. You have to go through 3 sub-menus to be able to change the heat levels, which is very distracting, especially when you're riding. You're going like, okay, down here, twist, over, back out, back. Oh, I backed up too far. Now I got to go back in those 3 steps more to get to the seat. It's it doesn't make any sense. It looks beautiful. It's awesome looking, but it just doesn't work well.
Right. Yeah.
But the stereo.
Absolutely amazing. The Marshall speakers were great, but again, that's part of a package that you're paying extra to get. Whereas if you're looking at the Indian or the Harley, that's included with the bike.
Yeah.
Stereo systems, the BMW's aftermarket Marshall system was amazing. It was the best of the bunch, followed by the Indian, followed then by the Harley.
Yeah.
So the Harley-Davidson comes with a reflex defensive rider system, which includes cornering ABS and cornering enhanced traction control. The BMW has cornering ABS, linked ABS, and cornering traction control as well. The Indian has no traction control and, as we said earlier, ABS that could use some refinement.
Yeah, the least refined ABS, but it did stop the fastest.
But it stopped the fastest in our 60-0 test. So.
But there's just, the Harley and the BMW are very much, have better refinement in terms of traction control and that kind of stuff. Big heavy bagger, you know, you're like, what do I need that for? Well, what about pulling off the side of the road when you're pulling back onto the road?
When you're in the higher speed sweepers and that Indian gets that sort of wallowing effect, you want to know that if you hit some brakes to slow down, it's once again, it's not as refined. These aren't particularly safety, but modes too. Like, we should talk about that, even though they're not part of the safety system. Yeah.
They're the electronics, and so you've got rock, roll, and rain for the BMW.
Which everyone that I've ever talked to that's ridden the BMW puts it in rock and forgets about it.
Rock on.
Same thing with the Indian. Sport mode feels like it's sort of an exhibition mode. Like, look how much tire I can burn. Whereas standard is much more steady application. That's what you always want to be in. And then the Harley, I've never felt myself wanting ride modes. It just works. So throughout our ride, all testers agreed that the Harley-Davidson was the best motorcycle of the bunch.
Yeah, absolutely.
With starting MSRP of $27,099, the Street Glide Special as tested is $29,994. This includes the two-tone paint job and the 114 engine. Next to that, we've got the Indian with an MSRP of $27,999. That is as tested, that is the starting MSRP, no additional accessories or anything on that Chieftain Limited. And then lastly, you've got the R18B First Edition. Starting MSRP on that is $21,945, but in true BMW fashion, you will never see an R18B at that price. They always come with certain accessory packages put on. Our bike, as tested, was $28,870. The Harley-Davidson just feels so refined and cohesive because it has been refined over the last 50 years. Harley-Davidson has defined the bagger segment for so long, since that original Batwing fairing and hard bags were put on an FLH back in the late 60s. It's better on the highway, it feels planted, the technology package just feels very complete.
The easiest way to put it for me is, you know it when you see it, and you know it when you're riding it. And that's what it is with the Harley-Davidson. It just feels right, and it feels right almost all the time.
Yeah, both in style and performance.
I know that sounds very simplistic, but it's also very complicated to make that happen.
The Indian feels the most nimble and spry to me. At low speed, mid speed handling, it felt awesome. The infotainment system is intuitive and easy to use. The engine character I liked the most. It had the strongest roll on, had the strongest character off the line. I really like it. Ergonomically too, big floorboards, you can stretch around. The Limited has those crash bars so you can throw your feet up.
See, that's where we start to disagree, is definitely in the comfort thing. But I will say, great engine. But on the BMW, I think the fit and finish is impeccable.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's an interesting ride experience that I enjoyed a lot. And that was the thing with BMW. When I was enjoying myself on the BMW, almost more so than any other bike.
Yeah.
There's disappointments, but they're smaller for me. The Indian's disappointments were big, and when I wasn't having fun, I wasn't having fun. So that right there puts the BMW ahead of the Indian.
Sure. So as you've probably noticed by now, we are not in total agreement when it comes to second and third place with the Indian and the BMW. What it comes down to is basically a choice for the rider between engine performance on the Indian and fit and finish on the BMW.
I'll agree with you on that point for sure.
If you want to see where we landed, click the link below to check the written article. You can find all the specs and technical info there as well. If you like what we're doing, thanks for watching. Like, follow, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.